Oh, shoot. Good morning and welcome to another edition of the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd, many corporations bowed to public pressure and began promising more diversity, equity, and inclusion. Social media spaces led the charge, demanding equity and inclusion. However, a brand new report shows the stark truth behind that. It shows that when a white influencer gets paid $135, a black influencer on average gets less than $100, and oftentimes even less than the average. That finding is the result of a new first of its kind research study published by the global public relations firm MSL US in partnership with influencer advocacy and marketing agency, the Influencer League, titled Time to Face the Influencer Pay Gap. The report found that on average, there's a 29% racial pay gap between black and white influencers. This morning, we discussed that with NNPA's TikTok manager, Carrington York, and Howard University senior Makai Washington. But first, let's bring on the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Dr. Chavis, good morning.
Good morning, Stacey Brown. I'm reporting this morning from Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you so much, and we're looking forward to hearing our illustrious and distinguished communication students from Howard University. So pleased to have them a part of the Black Press of America. On behalf of Karen Carter Richards, the chair of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, representing 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies all across the country, we're pleased to be a part of this Thursday morning, Let It Be Known.
And Dr. Chavis, our headlines this morning: a former Minnesota police officer betrayed the public faith and public trust vested in her when she killed a 20-year-old motorist earlier this year. A prosecutor said during the trial yesterday, Assistant Attorney General Erin Eldridge raised her right arm and recited the oath taken by Brooklyn Center police officers, and then accused defendant Kim Potter, former police officer Kim Potter, of violating that vow on April 11th when she came upon motorist Daunte Wright. This is the oath of a Brooklyn Center police officer, Eldridge told the juries. This is the standard they hold themselves to, and they take an oath to do so. Their duty to their badge and to the community is to protect life, not to take the life, the prosecutor said. It's a case, Dr. Chavis, that we were all appalled. Former officer Potter said she mistook her gun for her taser and shot and killed Daunte Wright.
Yes, it's terrible. But again, you have to look at what happened before she even reached for her gun and her taser. She presumed that this black man had done something wrong. She presumed that this black man was guilty. And this is too often where black people, men and women, young and old, are presumed to be criminals. The criminalization of Black America continues in too many police officers. And if it wasn't for the videotape, we would not be having this discussion. So once again, it is the visualization of the criminalization, the systemic racism that impacts Black America. And so, it's a terrible travesty of justice. And we hope that the courts will find this police officer guilty of the unjust killing of our young brother.
Yeah, this idea, a lot of people scoffed at the idea that she mistook her gun for a taser, and other officers have said there's a distinct different feel to the taser and the gun. So we'll see what this how this trial wraps up. We'll see what the jury decides here. And also, yeah. Dr. Chavis, in the news this morning, Tiger Woods is making a comeback. Yep, the golf legend, who will be inducted into the PGA Tour's Hall of Fame in March, has just committed to playing again nearly 10 months after his horrific car crash in which he broke his leg, and injuries were such to such extent that the doctors considered amputation. Tiger officially signed up for next week's PNC Championship with his son, but Tiger has reportedly made huge strides in his comeback efforts, swinging his golf clubs regularly, and now he clearly feels he's ready to compete in a tournament. In a statement, Tiger Woods says, although it's been a long and challenging year, I am very excited to close it out by competing in the PNC Championship with my son, Charlie. I'm playing as a dad and couldn't be more excited and proud. Tiger Woods, again, doing what for many others would be impossible, Dr. Chavis.
Absolutely. And we salute him for being a great dad. He's not only a great golfer, he's a great dad. So, you know, we better look out for Charlie Woods. Don't sleep this young golfer that's coming up. And so we are very grateful. You know, in the Black press, in the Black church, we say God answers prayers. And millions of people were praying for the recovery of Tiger Woods. And it looks like these prayers are being answered.
Yeah, Tiger had previously announced that if he were to make a comeback, he would limit his tour schedule. So this will be on the schedule. But we also know, Dr. Chavis, the competitiveness of Tiger Woods. He has 15 major championships, still just 3 shy of the all-time record of 18. So we know that in the back of his mind, that record is attainable, and he wants it.
Absolutely. Well, you know, again, I don't want to be theological, but God has blessed Black Americans to strive for excellence in all of the sports, in all of the entertainment, in all of the science, and all of the mathematics, in all fields. So this should be encouraging to a lot of young golfers. This should be encouraging. We're thankful that the NMPA has a relationship with the PGA Tour and with the PGA of America. And we're going to continue to press forward because there are a lot of scholarship opportunities now for college and as well as in high school for young golfers. And we commend that. But in terms of Tiger Woods, we wish him all the best from the Black press of America.
Absolutely. And Dr. Chavis, racial injustice continues. Even on social media platforms, Black social media influencers are paid a lot less than white influencers, according to a new report. Despite the overwhelming popularity of some, there's still no equity even on social media. Here to discuss it is NMPA's TikTok manager, Carrington York, and fellow Howard University student, Makai Washington. Good morning, Carrington and Makai.
Good morning, Stacy. Thanks for having us.
Good morning, Makai, and good morning, Carrington. First of all, the Black press salutes both of you. We're so proud that there's a new generation of freedom fighting journalists coming up, and both of you represent the best.
Thank you. So
Absolutely.
much.
Well, let's get started. Carrington, I'm going to start with you. Carrington does a great job with the NMPA's TikTok, managing that account. Has some great stuff on there. But Carrington, influencers. We hear all about influencers and what they mean, how much money they make. But with so many other things, when it comes to white versus Black, as far as the pay gap, there is a huge pay gap.
Yes. It surely seems to be a growing issue, the discrimination that Black creators face. Not long ago, there were reports that Black TikTokers were being shadow banned or removed from the algorithm, which definitely prohibits their content from being monetized, which is the bottom line here.
Yeah, and Makai, when you see reports like this, does it surprise you at all?
It doesn't surprise me. And like, you know, you also have to think about just financially, like the gap in general, to where we're talking about, you know, in the report, it talks about how, you know, 49% of the Black creators who contribute say that they are offered below market value. And so when we talk about those things, it's kind of like when you're saying, you know, these Black influencers are basically saying that, you know, when they're going to these brands and these companies, they're not necessarily getting the right tools to where they're able to negotiate and like fend for themselves because they're not shown like professionally how to basically make these deals. And so when these things happen, it obviously, you know, puts that gap, it makes that gap even wider. And it's just like, but it's also because they're not able to have that professional help and that professional advice, that also makes it harder for them to kind of argue to people that this is because it's racially biased and it's racial discrimination. So that's really what it is. It all comes down to pay transparency.
Yeah, and the report highlights that after George Floyd's murder, June 2nd came to be known as Blackout Tuesday. This was following the Tuesday following George Floyd's murder. And even while social media timelines were peppered with black boxes and DEI friendly mission statements, there were insidious and systemic disparities occurring on those same platforms within the ranks of the influencers leveraged by those same companies. We heard all the companies talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, but it just didn't happen. It hasn't happened. And yet we see some of the biggest influencers still being shortchanged along with everyone else of color, right?
Absolutely. Yes, when it comes to a lot of these institutions, these companies, performative activism comes to mind. A lot of what they say doesn't always show with their actions, which is ultimately the kind of work we need to put into these kind of situations.
And even sorry.
No, go ahead, Makai.
Yeah, and just what Carrington was talking about with performative activism, it's also just kind of like that distinction between Black influencers who are very much wanting to spread awareness within within racial inequality and racial injustice, but kind of like them like Black influencers not getting enough or being necessarily kind of negatively impacted for doing those things, rather than their white influencers who, when they're posting about racial injustice, racial inequality, they're kind of getting praise for it, and it's kind of upping up their revenue as well as like getting them more seen, and definitely also relates to the racial wage gap, and it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, it says the report spells out too that 49% of Black influencers reported their race contributed to an offer below market value. We see that constantly. But tell us, Carrington and Makai, some of the top influencers, why are influencers, and I guess it's in the name, right? But I was going to say, why are they so valuable? Why are they so important when it comes to social media influencers anyway?
Well, in this day and age, being an influencer, which ultimately means you're someone who has a following, and like the name says, you have an influence on the public. These days, those kind of positions on social media make you eligible for all sorts of things: brand deals, movie roles, TV appearances that can ultimately add to your resume and also your bank account. So with those kind of positions, that makes influencers content that they create really important as far as like managing monetization from it. So that's why influencing is important.
Yeah, and Makai, one of our viewers says, what Black-owned platforms can we move all of our social media talents to? Do you foresee, Makai, something like that occurring?
I do, and I think that there's definitely has been like talk about making our own Black-owned platforms, kind of so that we're able to necessarily keep within, so that it's not necessarily being taken away or people are using it to their advantage, and so I do think that with time, it definitely does take the whole community, and it definitely does take everybody inputting. Exactly, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to contribute to this, but that definitely, like I said, it takes time, and it's definitely a process, especially when you have big companies like TikTok and Twitter, and they definitely have a lot of white influencers who are making way more than Black influencers, and so it's kind of like how exactly can we be our own TikTok and like still be just as valuable as them, knowing that they're making millions, and that's kind of where we have to come up from. But it does take the whole community, as well as it takes a lot of awareness and how we are able to actually have that success.
Yeah, Dr. Chavis, I know you are all for ownership and Black platforms.
Oh, absolutely. I know I see our chair, Karen Carla Richards, is on, and I think she would appreciate what I'm about to say. I don't know what Mackay and Conjure are doing on January the 19th through the 20th to the 21st. We're having a conference in Florida, Midwinter Training Conference, all of our publishers. A record turnout of publishers already joined. But one of our workshops on that Friday is about um, app development. It's about social media influencers. And I think you just hit on a subject that we really need to deal with. One, owning our own social media platforms, but two, also this issue now, influencing social media while Black. There's discrimination going on. Even when we get the numbers, we're not paid what our influence values are. And so I think that we would love to have you to come down from Howard University to join our publishers and other young people. I'm just thinking now about how to enrich this particular workshop because we definitely want to involve Generation Z, which you represent, as well as millennials in our Midwinter Conference. This is a great subject. And I know this is later be known, Stacey. So we're gonna have to continue this. I'm already writing my op-ed right now, influencing social media while Black.
And it's also not getting paid our worth, but also it comes to not necessarily, it's not blaming, and of course I never blame us for it, but we're also not necessarily guided in a way where we're necessarily experiencing what we're worth. And we're kind of just like, well, what is it that we should be taking from these brands and from these companies, and what exactly is it that my value has for this brand, when realistically I feel like sometimes we take deals that necessarily aren't as valuable as we're thinking they are. It's just because we're not necessarily equipped with the professional advice, as I was saying earlier, that our white influencers would be having. And so that's a disadvantage to us because that's stopping us from making financial decisions that can necessarily where you could be worth way more, maybe even you could be making more like $100 more off of something, but you stuck with something less than 100 because you just thought that was exactly what was handed to you and that might be the best. But I think that it takes professional advice as well as having people teach you those things so that that paid transparency definitely does stick with you, because I feel like that also is a huge contributor to why it's such a huge gap.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mackay. Carrington, is it about not knowing? Is part of it about not knowing our worth?
I think financial literacy definitely plays a part in how Black creators move through this industry, because it's played a part in how we've moved through history in this country, regardless of what industry we're in. So I think there does need to be an effort for us to understand how to negotiate, how to understand how not to fall victim of any imposter syndromes, and really believe what our worth is, because we do kind of set the blueprint for all things in social media, pop culture, and things of that nature. So
It's not even a kind of. It's not even a kind of. It does start. It does start with Black influencers, and so when you see that Black influencers are starting these trends, and you can go all the way back to TikTok with the dances. That was Black influencers that started that. But you see that there's white influencers who are actually getting that credit, and you see that there's people on Jimmy Fallon, white influencers, who are doing the dances that the Black influencers created. But you never saw a Black influencer doing that dance, which they should have, because that's what it comes down to. It's just making us more marketable, and also just telling ourselves this is exactly what we deserve, because that is what started it. And so I think that also it comes to how how Onyx Carrington, you had pointed out, just how during TikTok with the dances, there was kind of this protest where we were just saying, oh no, we're not going to make a certain dance. We're not going to make dances anymore because we seeing that they're not necessarily getting credit for it, and that white influencers are definitely just profiting off of it. So it takes steps like that just to say that, we need to make ourselves valuable, because there's so much value in Black influencers already. And so it's kind of like saying, this is exactly what we need to do to make sure that it stays valuable just to us and to the people that create it, because that's super important.
Yeah, and influencers, do they often cross over platforms? Say, if you're an influencer on Instagram, or you're an influencer necessarily on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter or other platforms?
Absolutely. If you have a following on TikTok, you can definitely have your following migrate over to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or what have you. Of course, with Facebook owning Instagram, they have some of the same shadow banning policies, which can affect influencers of color, especially Black influencers. So that is something to keep in mind. But again, like Makai was referring to, it's really important to have these virtual Black spaces that are only for us. And so I look forward to seeing what comes of that initiative.
Yeah, and you mentioned, and Dr. Chavis, I know you're here in Carrington, mentioned shadow banning. So in other words, it's the platforms themselves that are hurting Black influencers.
Yes, oftentimes it is the platforms themselves. There will be language that may speak to things about race or discrimination. And if the platform sees that that's not a fit conversation to have on the platform, they may remove the post entirely, even though it may, uplift the Black community. To some of these platforms, it's destructive, or it's disruptive, or it's something like that, that they don't want to gain traction on the platform, which is really disconcerting, like as an influencer, as a Generation Z representative.
Wow. Makai, David Youngblood, one of our viewers, one of our loyal viewers, we always appreciate David's questions. He always asks some great ones. He's asking, though, how do you monetize your influence? And he wants to know the steps or actions one should take, or one takes to do so.
How do you monetize your influence? So obviously there's various ways, and there's not just one answer to that. But I know that, when it comes to, how exactly you go about those things, sometimes you yourself don't know the answer. And sometimes it's okay to not know those things, because maybe you weren't taught those, how to monetize things. And so that's where it comes, where you just need to, we need to have resources that are able to help equip us with those issues, but also affordable resources, because it's not every person of color, Black person, can necessarily afford to have somebody to give them professional advice. Sometimes they're just making TikToks, and then they probably don't even notice how valuable it is, or they don't know how far they'll actually get. So when, they come to these deals, they're not necessarily expecting, they probably didn't even expect to even get that many numbers. So it's kind of like they take it at whatever chance they can, because it's just like, I just want to keep going with this. But realistically, it comes down to, when you have that financial advice, when you have the professional advice, you go into brands, you go into companies, and you basically have somebody right there with you, and to say that, this is exactly what they deserve. It's not just getting just like a piece of the bread, it's getting the whole loaf. And so, when we talk about steps to monetizing your influence, that's exactly what it takes, because sometimes you don't necessarily know what steps to take, and that's okay. I definitely can say I'm definitely not an expert in that, but I can say that, it definitely does help to have people who are knowledgeable in that, because that's where it goes. Because sometimes we don't necessarily know how to fend for ourselves, or we don't know how to basically market ourselves the best way, because we weren't necessarily taught the best way on how to. And that's what we need to work on. And I think that that's more so, how do we get that help from other people financially to where it's affordable for us? Because that's one of the problems, as I explained. It needs to be affordable, and also needs to be accessible.
And Carrington, what are some of the top topics that really lead to being today an influencer? I mean, we see food, we see hair, clothing. What are the topics that really get the likes and the hits and the views?
I would say beauty is at the top these days. I think it's always throughout every generation a kind of sought after industry. Women are some of the big purchasers in the market of beauty. And so anything revolving makeup, hair definitely speaks to the women often in Generation Z and things of that nature. So that's the first thing that comes to mind, but there's really influencers for everything. ASMR, which is basically people, making tapping sounds on a microphone, like those things, you just find your village and you go with it. But I think the most important thing is to know the market that you're entering. And once you know that market, you can demand what you're worth and go from there.
And someone, I would imagine it's Cheryl Smith of the Texas Metro News. I think it is. The name doesn't come up, but it says, "You two young folks, please make your way." Oh, Bobby Henry, make your way down here to Hollywood, Florida. They want you down at the NMPA's Midwinter Conference, which is from January 19th to January 22nd. Dr. Chavis, I enjoyed this conversation because we have two very, very wonderful people to talk to about it. Too young, how you on the verge of graduation too.
Well, they're journalists. They know they are practicing their craft while they get their degree, and that it bodes well for the future of the Black press. And I hope that we retain these jewels, these geniuses, and so they don't get scooped up by the white press. We need to make sure we have retention. We need retention in the Black press. We need transfer. And I think overall, what we've been discussing also is the appropriation of Black culture. People appropriate our culture for profit in our dance, in our music, in our science, our technology. We've invented so many things that don't get credit for it. So I just think that this is a great discussion, particularly on social media influencers. And I just want to thank Makai and Carrington for their contributions this morning. And I'm serious, we're offering you an invitation to join us at our expense to our Midwinter Conference, because we think you have some invaluable insights to share with our publishers and with other Generation Z and millennials across the country.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of me and Makai. The Black press has a special place in our hearts as Black journalists at Howard University. You being a fellow Bison, Dr. Chavis. So I accept the invitation.
I definitely accept. And, even with just, because when I used to intern with NAACP and, I was working with the Crisis magazine, it definitely kind of made me see things kind of in a deeper meaning for like the Black press and how important it is, because we cover those stories and we're on the front line of the news, and it's important that we necessarily are making ourselves profitable as well as keeping that to ourselves, much so that we're creating our own networks and we're creating our own newspapers and continuing to do that, because the Black press is super important. And realistically, there is no news without the Black press.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and before we close, from each of you, Carrington and Makai, just maybe 2 or 3 of the influences you might follow.
Ooh, there's so many.
Right.
I'll say my favorite at the moment is the NNPA Black Press account on TikTok. They just warm my heart. I love them.
Nah, that wasn't fair. That wasn't fair.
I'm feeling it. I'm definitely feeling it, Makai.
Too, I'll do my one because she definitely has resonated on our family. Was it Tabitha Brown?
Oh yes, Tabitha
Brown. Definitely one of the best TikTok creators. Definitely saving us through the pandemic just with her messages and just so much joy that she brings. And you're going to get that from every Black influencer, because that's exactly what it is, what we bring to the table. We bring joy, we bring comedy, we bring laughter, we bring love, we also just we start things, we create things, and we totally execute it. And so that's what being a Black influencer is, and that's exactly why it's important that we're getting paid for those things and we're actually getting our worth out of that, because we make the culture. We are the culture.
Mackay, Washington, Howard University, broadcast journalism major, about to graduate. Carrington York, our NMPA's TikTok manager and fellow Bison, about to graduate. We appreciate both of you so much. And yes, we are looking forward to the NMPA's Midwinter Training Conference, which kicks off January 19th. We're going to be at the Diplomat Beach Resort in Hollywood, Florida. Carrington and Mackay is going to be there, they said. So you guys got to be there too. Our viewers are welcome. We're going to do a lot of great live stuff there. January 19th to the 22nd. The theme is the publishing industry, advancing the Black press of America, reaffirming, engaging, and empowering. Visit www.nmpa-events.com to register and reserve your hotel room. And get this, if you only have 3 days left to get the very, very special NMPA's discounted rate at this beautiful, beautiful resort. It must be reserved by December 12th. Again, www.nmpa-events.com. Join us January 19th in Hollywood, Florida. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We will see you tomorrow.